Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on South by Southwest Online. I am Vanity Fair's Britt Hennemuth, and I am here today with Zoe Lister-Jones and Daryl Wein, the writer, director, producer, stars of How It Ends. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Britt.
And we just discovered that this is our 10-year anniversary from when I was the locations intern on your film Lola Versus in 2011. So this is a full
star locations intern with little Jess McGee.
And that was a tough that was tough competition, that locations team, and you were the star.
Wow, thank you. I won't tell Jess. And I thank South by Southwest for bringing us back together on this.
I know.
So I want to start from how you guys decided to do this, because I know personally that you guys are the most busy, creative, constantly creating, making, working, writing, building people I know. So for most people like myself, who was overpaying for toilet paper and like hiding inside, you guys decided to make a movie. So what was really the impetus of How It Ends?
We were buying a lot of overpriced toilet paper too.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of money at Erewhon.
The impetus, I think, for How It Ends was, I mean, it was sort of like twofold. The first part was that we were facing, all of the sort of unprecedented emotions. I mean, the emotions were precedented. The level at which they were like coming at us was unprecedented because of the times, and it was really quite early in quarantine. So I think the fear and uncertainty was so overwhelming. And I think for Daryl and I, we've always, for better or for worse, processed our emotions through our work. And then I think we were also just so concerned and struggling with feelings of despair around what the future of filmmaking was going to look like and when we would be able to make a film again. And so I think it was the sort of intersection of those two things that inspired us to try to make a film that worked within the parameters of quarantine, that was also very much an exploration of what we were going through emotionally.
Which was a lot.
Yeah.
Very much.
Because I have no marker of time through all this. Like, what was I watching? Like, it was like, okay, I was watching The Sopranos, and then I was like, so what was like, were you starting this in March?
Post Love Island. I mean, not Love Is Blind. This was like a little post Love Is Blind.
In the last year?
You remember? Okay. Love Is Blind
feels like 100 years ago.
That was like April, maybe.
It was a little after Love Is Blind. I remember Love Is Blind being...
There's two eras. There's pre-Love Is Blind and there's post-Love Is Blind.
And obviously Love Is Blind was a huge inspiration for the film.
Yeah.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah.
You couldn't get any of them to make a cameo, or?
They did. They just got cut. Yeah.
We actually we only conceived and created the film with a wall between us and never saw each other the whole process. And it was sometime around then, yeah. And then we shot into the summer and then edited into the early fall, and then suddenly it got into Sundance, which was an amazing thing to have happen in such a truncated amount of time. Because once again, we had so much time on our hands. We had nothing to do but work on the film and, and then cry in between.
Right. You guys, how much of it is improvised? Because I know that's something you guys like to do. Was a lot of it improvised? Did you have a scene breakdown? Is it really heavily scripted?
We had a very detailed outline that that was our starting point. And then we started to script scenes within that outline. And so it's really a mixed bag. Like, all of Kaylee and my scenes are scripted. My scene with Helen Hunt and my scene with Bradley Whitford are both scripted. My scenes with Logan Marshall Green are scripted. But then, Nick Kroll and Lamorne Morris and Olivia Wilde, those were all pretty detailed, containers within which we then said, let's just play.
Yeah, and then we just give every actor line readings for every line, and we mouth them right in front of them, so they even get the facial expression the same.
Which is why they love working with you guys.
They
Freedom.
love it.
Yeah.
It just that amount of that kind of control is, I think, what really gets them
Actors
excited.
love to feel controlled by
Yeah.
directors.
Totally. What was it, actually, I'm curious, what was it like? Because for me, I'm so socially bizarre right now after like sitting inside for, so it's like, ugh. Like, what was it like, Zoe, for you, and then for all the co-stars, like having to leave their bubble and then assume different character? Was it was there a bit of a struggle there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for many of us, this was our first time like leaving the house, because it was sort of that early. I remember Olivia Wilde like drove up and said it was her first time driving a car in like many months, and she like didn't know if she would remember how to do it, and that we sort of like appeared as a mirage to her. But
self-driving cars would have been great during the pandemic.
But yeah, I mean, I think a large part of the conversations that we were having with our actors, who were luckily friends, so they were personal conversations when we were making the ask, was about levels of comfort, not just in terms of, safety protocols, which of course we followed, but in terms of like, I think a lot of them were nervous that they would be able to be funny, because none of us had been in front of a camera, and we were all in, the depths of really such despair and and fear. And so the idea of like, can I show up today and like make a joke was a big question mark. And then I think because of the nature of the narrative, which is not centered in the pandemic, but it's sort of like pandemic adjacent in that it's an apocalyptic day. We just said like, wherever you are emotionally on the day that we're shooting, that's where your character is. And so like, there is no pressure to be anything but what you are. And so I think it was really freeing for myself and for a lot of our cast to be able to do that.
Totally. I mean, how important was it for you guys not to have it be about the pandemic? Because I feel like I'm getting inundated with like pandemic content that's coming out that I don't want to watch, but there's something about what you guys did where it's like, oh, it's so cleansing, even though it's like grappling with everything that we've been dealing with, but it will stand alone outside of this time of our lives. Like, was that something you guys discussed?
Yeah, for sure. We were like, this cannot be about the pandemic because we're living it and it's too much and we see it every day. Yeah, I mean, we were just limited by the pandemic just in terms of, the parameters with which we had to shoot the film. Like we obviously can't shoot inside, so let's design a film that's all outside and let's kind of move away from the, doom and gloom style apocalyptic, end of world films that we've seen before, which, there's lots of great ones out there. But the like, Contagions and 28 Days Later, I think we were like, we've seen that and we don't really have the budget to be doing, huge set pieces anyway. So I think, we wanted to tell a more emotionally driven, character driven story from the get-go anyway, that was reflective of what we were going through as people. And again, doing a lot of therapy and unpacking our emotions and, a lot of self-actualization and trying to like stay strong during this uncertain time. And that conversation between the younger self and Zoe's character was like what we were doing in real life, and trying to get in touch with that fear that lives in us, lives probably within everybody. But because of the circumstance of the pandemic, it was like we were forced to look so intensely at ourselves. And so I think just like using the context of the pandemic as a frame for us to then go explore those deeper emotional issues was kind of a fun challenge, and then, yeah, I don't know. It was a very Mr. Lister Films production. As Zoe's wearing our merch here, we have our little Mr. Lister shirts.
Every day we're hustling.
In that, it was just a very small team. We didn't have a big footprint or a huge crew. And that made it also easier to move around and shoot during the pandemic on the empty streets of LA.
But I think we also we generally make the films that we want to be seeing. And obviously the pandemic has been such a it's been all about consumption of content because we have so much time to do that. And
right in the middle.
I think we wanted to be watching comedies that also felt poignant and felt that we could be sort of seeing ourselves in them. And so I think that was the challenge that we set out to achieve with this film, was to create something that wasn't, that could live outside of the pandemic, but that could bring, I guess, some levity without denying the emotional impact of what we were all going through.
To me, what was so fun was sort of that emotional undertow of the send up of LA throughout the whole thing. It's yes, you have the inner child. Yes, you have the seeking everything you need before you die, which is a heavy topic. But then it's the satire of the LA experience with the recycling and the interior decorators of the strip clubs and the narcissists who can't apologize. And how fun was that for you, who are so aware of the ridiculousness of our great city, for you guys to write and play with?
I mean, just walking through LA alone is absurd because nobody ever does that. So that was fun. And I think,
it's always LA is, it's a strange mix. I think we're both East Coasters. I was raised in New York, Daryl in Connecticut, much like yourself, Brett. And so I think we have this interesting relationship to LA where we're both outsiders and insiders. And so I think that, that probably translated into the film.
I mean, the idea for Olivia being a psychic would have only come out of our experience living in LA, seeing 5 to 6 psychics a month. And because our first few films, Breaking Upwards and Lola Versus, were very New York, and New York was such a character. And now we've made 3 films in LA, Band-Aid, and then White Rabbit, and How It Ends, which all were at Sundance actually, which is cool.
What was, I think about for our audience at South by, there's so many burgeoning filmmakers. What were the biggest hurdles for you guys? Was the permit office closed? Give me some of the inside baseball filmmaking trauma that you guys endured to get this story told.
Well, when we made Breaking Upwards, which was at South by Southwest 10 years ago, it was a very similar experience in what we did with How It Ends, actually. We did it very guerrilla. It was myself and one friend on camera. We had a sound mixer, we had a COVID specialist, we had a virtual UPM, and we had one PA that would rotate in and out here and there. And then it was just Zoe and I producing and directing and first ADing. They were doing, all the actors doing their own hair and makeup. So it was the challenges were that we were wearing many hats, but I feel that's de rigueur for indie filmmakers, who are starting out and just trying to do it themselves. So I think it was adhering to the health protocols was a challenge, making sure everyone was safe and dealing with PPE and all of that. We would pass a mic through a plastic bag where an actor would go retrieve it. We had a pulley system with little mice.
Everything was when I'm thinking about it time-wise, we as a culture were learning different, the way that COVID was being passed, we were still, I remember the first month I was just wearing gloves.
Yeah.
So were you dealing with that? It was ever evolving, oh God, we need face shields. We need
Yeah.
It was a weekly battle of
definitely.
Making sure we were following and had all the things that we needed to keep people safe.
I loved how there was, you kind of as the audience with this film you just dive right in, and then it's okay, are they friends? Are they sisters? Are they, it's the inner child? And I loved that. So talk to me about sort of your dynamic of working with Kaylee and why she was the right person for this project.
I'm obsessed with her. And as you know, since you know her personally, she's an angel sent from heaven, as a person, where you're just how do I just like put you in my pocket and never let you go? Which is obviously a very healthy relationship. It's
again, it's all about control, right? High levels of control.
Yes,
but yeah, I mean, she auditioned for the craft, and I watched her tape, and it was one of those tapes where you just like sort of lean in, and they're just like, there's something so unquantifiable about the sort of rawness of her talent, and she's such an old soul. And in the craft, in many ways it was loosely based on some adolescent experiences of mine, not as a young witch, but as a young woman. And so a lot of the work that Kaylee and I were doing on the craft was talking about my inner child and my younger self and how she was embodying that. And then we became so close, and it was such a transformative experience emotionally for both of us. And because she was the lead of the film, and it was the first film that she was really carrying as the lead, we had a really interesting dynamic, both as friends and director, actor, but she would come over every weekend. We were shooting in Toronto, and I would basically act every scene opposite her as every other character. So we also had already worked together, even though it wasn't in front of camera. We were doing a lot of like scene work as actors together. So this felt like just like such an organic extension kind of that work. And it came pretty quickly on the heels. Like we had wrapped the craft in January.
Right.
So it was this was just a few months later. And there was no question, like we were already thinking, because Kaylee was a part of our pod, like how do we create something? And she really wanted to create something. And I think the day that we cracked this idea, we were like, all right, let's bring it up to Kaylee. We'll see if she's down. And she texted me that day, like, let's make something together. And it was this weird sort of intimate psychic connection, because she is a little witch.
It's a little witch. And she's from Springfield, Missouri, just like Brad Pitt. So there is something in the water.
We do know this.
That raw
daughter. His long lost daughter.
I think also, just for like the audience that will be watching this, I think so many people set out to do something in the pandemic. And I do think that there are great intentions, myself included. I had plans I was going to do. What do you guys think it is, the sort of unquantifiable thing for you guys as creators, directors, producers, writers, that you guys do it? Like it's not an idea that you just kind of ruminate. Like you guys are doers. And I've always really respected that and admired that, and watching your work. What do you think it is for people who are just starting out that want to do something that you guys have, or encourage people to try to do?
Green juice. It's the green juice. I think like fear is a big inhibitor of creativity, and something we talk a lot about. And we try and lean into that fear, because if we let our fear hold us back, we wouldn't make any of these films. And we always have that discussion. We're like, especially during the pandemic, we were scared, we were afraid to like get out there, and you always are questioning your ideas, and like, is it good enough? Is anyone gonna like this? And there's a lot of self-doubt in there. But I think we continue to try to just let it come out in whatever way it does, and each one is a learning experience. And I think, I don't know what I attested to other than like a deep form of anxiety. And, maybe like Jewish survivalism, just that determination to needing to keep moving forward. I think we both have trouble sitting still. And I think that's also part of our practice spiritually, that we're trying to like continue to figure out how to balance the professional and the personal. So that is important too. You have to make sure you're okay. And that's what this film is all about. Like at the end of the day, this film is about self-love and self-care, and like meeting yourself at your kind of most vulnerable and terrified place. And so I think for all the filmmakers out there that are, trying to get something off the ground, our motto is always, and similar to like, filmmakers like the Duplass brothers.
Just do it. We came up with that motto. Just do it.
Yeah. Nike They ripped us off pretty bad.
Yeah, you get the residuals or whatever.
Yeah, that's why we have money.
Yeah, it's all from Nike.
That's how we make our movies.
Yeah.
I would say too, like, yeah, I mean, when we made Breaking Upwards, we made it for $15,000. And that was like, I think when we basically were like, how small a budget could we make a film on? And then we work backwards. Like, it's not like, let's like keep going, and I think that's sort of been, in some ways, that was such a great training ground for us to be able to know that sort of anything is possible. Like, and that if you're lucky enough to be a part of an artistic community, that it is about sort of leaning on that community and calling in people in that community, which we've also really relied on in our careers.
And there's so many resources now that weren't there when we were younger. Like, to go get a 4K camera and someone to help with sound, like everyone can kind of do that. Like, you can teach yourself. Like, I edited this film with a friend, with a co-editor. But like, I had just taught myself how to edit some years ago. And same with cinematography. I was just like, it'll be easier if I can just figure out how to do this, so then I don't have to rely on another person's schedule. I mean, it's great to collaborate and have teamwork, for certain productions, but there's also something really nice about, and this is what I always am trying to return to, that sense of play.
I think, yeah, you touched on something that I think is so cool about the way you guys work is community. And I think that how important is it for goodwill in this business? Because I think people pay it forward back to you guys every time you come out for another round of storytelling. Like, people want to be a part of and I think that speaks volumes to you two as creators. Like, there's a lot of people who don't have great attitudes and no one wants to help them make a movie. So like, in this small town, how important is that for you guys?
Thanks, Britt. It's so important. Oh my God. It's like the most important thing, especially when, we're making indie films that are, where essentially we're our own casting directors, that is a really important element to be able to know that, that our friends are going to be willing to come participate in an experiment, essentially, and this was the greatest experiment of them all, because it was also in such a, crazy time. But the luck that we had was also that all of these actors who would otherwise have been working were completely available. So, but yeah, I mean, goodwill is so important. And I think it is something that hopefully just like one's integrity would lend them to anyway, but it is a really important thing to always know when you're coming up in any business, but especially in this business, that your relationships are everything. And even in the most stressful of situations, your behavior is always, being recorded by somebody somewhere to be like, I remember that person.
Also, I think, during this time, right, the world changes 100 times a month. And so to sort of, you're making a movie in March, April, May, June. It's going to Sundance in January. It's going to South by in March. And the world and the collective conversation has changed. What's appropriate, what as a culture, we've examined so much. Like, and I do feel like comedy has come under fire a lot throughout this year. And you guys set out to make a comedy. So how is navigating comedy in 2021 different than maybe when you guys started out?
There's been so much self-examination and examination of work. And I think even just since Trump's presidency, and like it just in 4 years, how much even, women and the Me Too movement, like it's almost hard to remember a time before the Me Too movement now when, and to see how much even just watching content pre-Me Too does not stand the test of time. And as a woman watching that content, it's always really surprising, because I'm like, how did that not bump for me? Like that we've all been so conditioned to accept things that were not okay. And so I think, yeah, it's such a blessing to be sort of in this time period where we are all forced to reckon with a lot more self-awareness, especially, you know, as white privileged people who are creating content. I think the responsibility is so huge and always evolving, you know, like it's always just something to, I think, be so conscious of.
Yeah, I think that is the responsibility of writers today, to be present with what's going on sociopolitically, and you know, they have to be paying attention and working towards subverting stereotypes and racism and sexism. You know, all of it needs to be like at the forefront of writers' minds, so that stories don't fall into cliche and objectification and, you know, all the traps that we've seen in the past. And I feel like I really feel a tide shifting. I mean, it's still not there yet, but it's nice to see more inclusion happening and representation, and see that, you know, reflected more and more. But we have a long ways to go, that's for sure.
How would both of you spend your last days on Earth?
I would, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
And we can talk about our separate experiences. I would throw a dance party that had a large and eclectic buffet in the center. There would obviously be people, because I'm very concerned with food poisoning, who would be, you know, there'd be a lot of rotation. I want it to be fresh because buffets are terrifying, especially in the time of COVID. And so there would be dancing, eating, fucking, dancing, eating, fucking, dancing, eating, fucking, dancing, eating, fucking, over until death.
Well, there you have it. That is how
That's
Zoe Lister-Jones and Daryl Wein would spend their last day on Earth. Thank you so much for being here with us at South by Southwest Online. If you have not seen How It Ends, watch it now. Thanks.